they've been able to say, I want to be a better person. I want to show up in this world in a different way. And they're willing to do whatever it takes to get there.
Got to ask you, what's that aha moment, that connecting of the dots for someone with sexual compulsive behaviors, where they finally start to, everything's just easier, right? Sobriety is easier, recovery is easier. Yeah. In your work, what is that realization? And then if you can kind of give us a tip or two on what someone can do independently or with their therapist to try to connect those dots on their own.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I work with a lot of people. I worked with hundreds of people. And I can say one thing that really is the aha moment is the ability to surrender to the process and really jump into it. Now, okay, surrender. I think the question where it gets complicated is, how do we do that? But what I see when people get better, they've accepted that they have to do this work. They're willing to do this work. They're willing to jump in, and they have crossed over to some humility. They've been able to say, I want to be a better person. I want to show up in this world in a different way. And they're willing to do whatever it takes to get there. And now that's a hard process, right? That's where we get into the complications of this. How do I make that switch? How do I change that? And I think when we start to look at that, there's a lot of different answers, and everybody's a little bit different in how they do that. But there's this shift where they've accepted that they have to do it, that this is the best thing they can do for their life, and then they fully embrace it. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I found in doing this, I've run a lot of different programs. We've had intensive programs, individual therapy, couples therapy, you name it. We've kind of done it all, from all the gamut. And one of the things I found is, in my younger days of doing this work, I remember getting trained, and I was working with Patrick Carnes and training with him. And he said, this is a 3 to 5 year process. And I said, no, we're going to do it faster. We're going to do it faster. I'm going to create a program, get this done in a year. And I put everything into that program. IOP, the best thing, everything I knew, all the research, the science. And as time went on, I discovered this is a 3 to 5 year process. That he was right, and that you can't speed it up. So you have to commit to this thing. And then the second thing I found, as I would interview people who had recovery and had some time in their belt, and I would ask them, okay, tell me what in our program helped you the most, and what didn't help you? What could we get rid of? And so I started doing all these interviews and putting all the data together and looking at it. And to my surprise, everybody had different answers. So I was thinking, we're going to cut all this stuff and we're going to refine it. We're going to get down. We're going to do this in a year and it's going to be done. And I just realized, like, this person would say, oh my gosh, that moment in the IOP, that was the best thing ever. It helped me so much. And then the next person I'd interview and go, God, that was a waste of time. I didn't even like it. Why do you even have that in the program? I'm like, what do we do here? But the one thing that they all had, the people that had recovery, was the willingness to try it, the willingness to do it, the willingness to just dig in and let go and stop thinking they knew everything, to trust people who could help them. And they surrendered to that. They let go of that and they moved into the process. And then they were willing to try whatever it took. And then they found the stuff that worked for them. I think that would be my most aha moment. And we can get into the details of some of those.
Oh, and we will. And I think I what you said is beautiful. And I just always want to clarify for everybody listening who's, either earlier on in this or a year, or you're worried about the health of your marriage. You will hear this 3 to 5, 3 to 8 number. And Duane, you already know where I'm going with this.
Yeah, I know where you're going.
Here's the thing, guys. Peace, both internally, from a sobriety standpoint, from a recovery standpoint, and from a relational recovery standpoint. The peace comes the moment you surrender, regardless of where you are on the recovery spectrum. I'll say that again. The moment the moment, and this includes your wife. It comes from the moment that you surrender, because your wife will feel that you surrendered. And that's where the peace comes in. Now, yes, to the finish line. Okay. I'm glad you said that, because there is no fast forward button on changing the brain. But so I always like to clarify that, because people get, little scared when they hear that.
A little
like,
scared,
but
I'm glad
hang out for 8 years, right?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up that piece, right? Because when I'm talking about long-term recovery, that's exactly what I'm talking about. At the 5-year mark, people felt really good in their life. They had done repair. They were living the life that they wanted. And there was a journey to get there. So I think it is important to point out, when I talk about that, that's what I'm talking about. But that doesn't mean where you are now in the pain and the hurt and the shame and the maybe self-loathing and the fear and all of that doesn't last forever through this 3 to 5 year process.
Well, and the unique thing too about this addiction, because of the two people who are being very intimately affected by this, my gosh, right? From the partner standpoint, it's like, they've got almost double the work that the addicts got half the time, right? So, but I think the reason so here's my thing that I always say: how recovered were you, like, before this whole thing? Let's even go before the old addiction, or whatever your behavior is. How recovered were you even back then, right? So let's say on the scale of 0 to 10, I'll just tell you, and you probably agree with this, most people are down in like the 3 or the 4. They are kind of ignorantly living their life with stuff that really should change, but it's not changing. And so the reason that you see these bigger numbers with this addiction that you don't see with, like, some of the substance addictions, you don't hear a heroin addict be like, man, it took me 8 years to kick this thing. I got all these diseases and lost my limbs. Right? You don't hear that story from these substance. The reason you hear those big numbers here is really just relationally, because of the facets that this particular addiction has its hands in life. It's like you really do, if you're gonna save your marriage and really step into this new thing, you got to go from that 4 up to a 10. And so it's like we're not like, there's no like getting back. It's like you need to become the person that you were really born to be. And that's really the beauty of, I'm always hesitant to celebrate this addiction, because if a partner's listening to this, it's like, don't you dare talk about this being a good thing, because the partner, it's the worst thing that's ever happened to them. But I will say this, my client, people in our group, oh my gosh, it is the greatest thing that's happened to their life. They become 5 times the man they ever were.
Absolutely. It's, one thing I love about this work is seeing the tail end of it and see people come to the other side. But you're right. It is a lot of work. And I think especially if you have betrayal in your relationship, because you have 2 relationships you have to work on. You have to work on the relationship with your partner who's traumatized, in trauma, and there's a ton of emotionality. They probably have some PTSD, all of that's going on, and all of your behaviors that kept the addiction hidden, so the gaslighting, all of that, you got to repair that. That in and of itself is a huge ask. And then second, you have to repair your relationship with yourself. And that's its whole journey. And so if you're in the situation where you're dealing with this addiction and you have a partner in it, you've got 2 things you're working on. And that is a lot of work. It's not easy. It is hard work, but like you said earlier, I mean, it's worth it at the end. When I see people who've gotten to that point of recovery, when we say 5 years, whatever, right? I don't want to get lost in that number, but people that really start to feel good in their life after they start doing this work, I mean, they're like you said, they're like, this is the best thing ever, because not only do I have a better relationship with myself, I have these amazing relationships, not just with my partner, with that. But usually if you're doing this work, you have recovery fellows, community that I see, especially for men, they don't have it all, right? I mean, so many men that I work with in the groups that I do and I run have never had intimacy in a way, especially with other men, like vulnerable discussions about their life, their feelings, their hurts, their pains, their fears, their shame. They don't have it. And it's like the first time they've ever experienced it. And it takes time to get comfortable in it because, a lot of these people, when you're struggling with this, you've grown up to be alone. You had to survive alone, right? You had to survive on your own. And however, your addiction came into the process to help you cope with that loneliness, you don't know how to do this. You don't have the skills, and so it takes time to learn it. It takes time for the brain to heal. But it's a worthwhile journey. I mean, like you said.
Oh, and
it's
part of the
get
surrender,
on and get going.
well, the surrender is, I mean, this is a process addiction. And I think when people hear the word addiction, the first thing that comes to their mind is substance, right? So it's like, okay, I'll just stop. Yeah. I'll stop the thing, and then my life will get better because I'll stop doing the thing. With a process addiction, and for those listening who are unfamiliar, essentially a process addiction is, you're getting the thing from the addiction, not from an external substance. So the substance entering your body that would alter your chemistry to have a high. With a process addiction, you're exercising brain processes. So there is a series of stories that you like about yourself. My favorite example for those who are still trying to wrap their head around this would be the most simple one for my audience is money. We like the story of money. We like when we have a really, really great month. That is a process. That is a process. We won't call it process addiction for most of my men. Their money addiction is bigger than their sex addiction. But that is a process addiction. And so when you hear these bigger, longer numbers and you hear the need to surrender, it's because really with something like this, it's all hands on deck. I mean, think about what that means is, you have these series of processes with sex addiction. And we're not talking just about the female figure and sex. It can be being lusted after. It can be you like to lust after people and you like that exchange. It could be something even I like married women because I like the feeling that she's sitting next to her husband and she's making a pass at me and she's doing that with him around. So that makes me better than him. She's the most attractive woman in the room and she wants me. These are all examples of just these variety of processes and they're all over the map. And so the reason it's surrender is the commitment to turn over every one of those stones. It's a commitment. It just is. And if you're not willing to flip them all over, that's where you start to hear, relapse. Or if, let's say you don't relapse, if your wife knows that some of those haven't been flipped, and she'll know, I mean, it's not that unobvious when you're running a program. She's going to be hyper aware after this, right?
Yeah. If you're hiding from these processes. So let me, how can I say this? So we get addicted to, like you said, the process in our brain. It's the relationship to that process that creates a certain rush for us that has a certain meaning to us, right? And like you said, so one person, it can be about being it's not about the sex itself, it's about being loved or wanted or needed. And that's why you have to slow this process down and really dig into the nuance of it to really understand what's going on. Oftentimes, people come into my office to deal with sex addiction, but rarely are we actually talking about the sex itself. It's about the relationship to it and what it means and how that, and like you said, with money too, what does that mean to you? What does it signify to you? What loss does it make up for that you're missing, that you might at this point, because you've practiced it so well, not even realize that's what it's going. One of the things I love doing when I'm working with people is when we start to look at people when they're dealing with their sex addiction, we're looking at their trauma and we're digging into their trauma a lot more. And all the time, what I see is you can take the trauma that happened to them over here. And if you look at their sexual behavior, their sexual addictive behavior, you can almost put it on top of the trauma, because it makes up for something that's lost, that they don't know how to get. But because it's been hidden in sexual arousal, they are no longer in touch with the trauma. And that takes time to unwind, and that takes time to view it, because some people just say, oh, I just have a high sex drive. I just, it's just so pleasurable that that I can do that. Right. That's why I do it. And always, when they start to slow it down, it's not about the pleasure. It's about, I'm making up for some deficit I don't know how to get in my real life. And when they start to discover that, and they discover how to get it in a healthy way in their own life, then they can start to heal. And that's sex or money or food or all of these behaviors. They're making up for something that the person has lost touch to. I don't know if that makes sense, where it's they're no longer aware of it consciously. It's habitualized. And so this pursuit of money or sex just becomes this automatic way of shifting their affective state.
Well, and high achievers, a lot of the times you will see them develop a sex addiction. And the irony is, it's always looked at this like weird thing that's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is in my life. The irony that I've seen, at least in our groups, because we meet in person 2 times a year, and we, big topic of this is, what is your relationship with, and we don't talk about it exclusively to sex. We actually talk quite a bit about the stories around money, assets, things you want to buy, because, and the reason we do that, is from being someone recovering from such a thing. That's really what it's about. You'll see a lot of, I think it's really hard to look at porn, sex, and affairs and say, oh, I need those things for these and these and these reasons. You know what's a lot easier? When you look at currency, because currency can be placed in zip codes. It can be placed in, there's a lot of things you can do. What we do in our group, because they're all financially successful, if you look for where you place your money, it can tell you a lot about your sex addiction, because a lot of the reasons we form a sex addiction is we can hide it, and money is really hard to make after 7 p.m. And so from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., you have to sit with yourself. And that's where, our go-to usually is shopping, researching something that can make us better, buying something, investing. But in the end, you will get tired of all of that. And, I hope that you're sleepy enough to go to bed, because if you're not, that's where we start looking at, other ways to get the same fix, the same exact fix, right?
Yeah, you're trying to fill the void with something that you cannot fill it with. It will never work. It will allow you to escape it and avoid it for a time, but that void will come back unless you really work on it. And my belief, that void is really about connection and loneliness. When we look at sex addiction, we look at it, at least I do, it's ultimately an intimacy disorder. It's, I don't know how to bond with other people. So I'm alone in this world. And the way I can distract myself from this loneliness is by working a lot, by being successful, by engaging in fantasy, prostitution, whatever it is, these people, I can get that intensity and mask the loneliness or the desire for intimacy. And then I would take it a step further. When we look a little bit deeper in that, we're looking at really shame, a deep sense of shame. Sometimes shame that is so deep that it's almost no longer visible to the person. When I work with highly successful people, right, they have an exterior of confidence. They have an exterior, they're CEOs, they're leaders, they take charge, they do amazing things, right? They create amazing things. I mean, but until we slow that down, they start to see where their shame is, and that takes time to get there. But sometimes it's hidden by entitlement, and they don't even realize they're doing it a lot of times. And it takes a really safe place for them to be able to start to strip that away and see it. And so they can identify with that shame core, or if you want to call it, like I love John Bradshaw's work around toxic shame. They can see the toxic shame, the shame that's tied to their identity, and they don't even see it anymore.
Well, and I think, and you can speak to this too, because I think the reason I started the groups that I run for high achievers, high performers, is because so many of the other groups and even therapists, if they're not hardwired like you, or they haven't necessarily navigated or see the world like you, they haven't used currency to fulfill the things that you have. And then even outside of currency, I'd say a lot of the people in my group have even outgrown money, and they're playing for impact. They're playing for legacy. They're playing for, they're playing a different game kind of above money, but it's really kind of all coming back to the same thing. But I'd be curious to have you speak for everyone listening. The being in that room with a bunch of other people who are lawyers, doctors, surgeons, entrepreneurs, whatever it be, being around a bunch of people like you who are doing what looks like a lot of good, because they're just killing it. They're, and a lot of them, like I said, they have risen above money. So they really do, from a outward appearance standpoint and a business standpoint, altruism really is in the front and center. They're making a lot of impact. They're doing a lot of good. They might be donating a lot of their money. Then you get in a room for a bunch of these people who are crushing it. But then, I think the painful thing about recovery is you start to realize a lot of it's coming from a dark place of inadequacy. It's like, hey, if I do enough good, then I'll be good. Speak to that for me.
Oh, I think you nailed it in that, right? And this is what's so hard about it when a person is highly successful, because they are doing amazing things, right? I mean, they create some amazing stuff, and that's really good, but it's masking that deeper loneliness. And what I found too is they can hide in that with each other. They're so it takes a lot of patience to help them step back into that loneliness, to be able to kind of let go and start to see that they have to change their relationship to what they're doing. They don't have to stop what they're doing per se, right? That's not what we're asking, because those are great things, right? Like some of the things that we've driven to do in our addictive process are amazing and do help the world, right? That's the craziness of it, right? But we have to work on our relationship to it. And that's where some humility comes in, and some ability to slow that process down and really think, what's going on here when I'm driven to do this? Another thing I see too is a lot of fear that if I give this part up of myself, I won't be able to do any of these things. I won't be able to create. I won't be driven. Somehow it'll take it away from me.
Can I add one in there too? The other one would be, I want this addiction out of my life because I'm perfect and good over here. So let's just get this damn addiction out so I can get back to crushing it. I want you to speak onto that, because that's another one. That's another story.
Great. I'm like, good luck with that. Have fun. You're not going to be successful at that, because once again, we go back to what I was talking about earlier. It's a relationship to the self. You cannot deny a piece of yourself, right? All of it is there, even the darkness. Right. And it's the relationship to that darkness that has to be transformed. Right. I mean, this is the hero's journey, right? It's Beowulf went into the cave and fought Grendel, right? Like, you have to go in, you have to go into the darkness. There's no way around it. You do not get to split pieces off of yourself to make to make that kind of commitment. If you want this, you have to own all of yourself, even the parts of yourself that you don't like, the darkness. But it is in that darkness that is where we find transcendence. But we have to go there. That's scary as shit. Excuse me. I don't know if I can say that. That's scary as hell, right? I mean, I don't want to look at my darkness. I don't want to look at the parts I have shame about, what are you asking me to do? Right? Like, are you freaking crazy? I'm just going to split this off and just be this good piece, right? And damn, it'll be awesome. And I'm like, that's a bargain that you're not going to win. That's you ain't going to do it.
Because I think what you're speaking to is something that, I think one of the more unique approaches that we use in our group is we do start with what is, because there actually is a good amount, like fulfillment sounds like a fluffy word, but there's quite a bit of psychological evidence to back up and prove how a human being is fulfilled. There's that, human beings, there's actually a lot of data to show why we are here and how we respond to certain activities. And so, what we speak to is really separating the two, because crushing it at the way that it's been established in 2024 in the United States, that is there's a series of steps for that. And we got to remember, the world wasn't designed for humans to get fulfilled. The country is designed to collect tax revenue and collect more tax revenue. Really, I mean, that is essentially why the country exists. It's why the laws exist. That's why the roads exist. The truth of the matter is, it's a platform for us to exchange currency and have roads to drive on. And I mean, in the end of it, so it would make sense that playing that game. I mean, just come on, everybody listening to this.
Yeah,
that game, it wasn't set up to be fulfilled. It was to allow you to exist. And so, this is beauty that you brought this up, because I think if you are splicing yourself and you're putting some over there, and then this other thing is just kind of either sitting, for most of high achievers, it's being unattended to. All of those aspects of true fulfillment is it's really not getting any attention. They're just doing whatever everyone else says. Oh, do this and you'll be admirable. Do this and you'll be fulfilled. But that's what you're speaking to, really, is if you're going to splice off the pieces and place them in this little capitalist thing, and you're going to expect a very human result, you're going to be up for a very rude awakening, because the two are very different games, and one has a promise, a scientific promise of fulfillment. Right. The other one, come on, ask a super rich person.
Well, right? I think what you're saying here too is like that kind of trying to split is a continuation of the addictive process, right? When I try and split myself into acceptable, and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to deny that other part of me, that is the nature of addiction. I'm using escape and avoidance strategies to not deal with that part, but that is a part of you, and that's why you have to change your relationship to it, and that's a relationship to the self, and that's an embracement of our humanity, of who we are as human beings. But there's incredible power in being able to do that. I think once people can get past that fear of embracing their whole self, they're still going to be successful. They can still create amazing things, and crush it. But it's also about having this relationship with yourself and crushing that, right? And being able to do that and having that whole picture. And once again, getting to that whole recovery, that's where I see people, they feel good about being there. And they make amazing things. It's great to see.
Well, what you're speaking to, that surrender that you spoke to in the very, very beginning, the men who have been in the Successful Addict, our program, it's not uncommon for them to double or triple their income, which is because really, when you think about how money is made, it's made when another human being sees the value in you. And the truth is, when you become one, when you marry, I always say, what PM Melody's work, a lot of these one-up things came from a one-down place. And I think when you try to only talk about and do the one-up things, even though they came from a one-down, to me, wholeness, recovery comes from when you keep those, because they're great. But when you honor and speak to why it's there, where it came from. You link the good to the bad. It's this great equalizer of, I'm actually not better than everyone. I am this way because of these experiences. And it's like, you would think a +1 with a -1 would make you 0. But the truth is, no one in this world can be better or worse. They are always what they are. Their value does not fluctuate. And that's the beauty of recovery, at least to me, is when a high achiever can marry their +1s with all of the 1 downs that made them that way, it actually brings you back to this place of equalness where you aren't alone. I mean, I think that's the biggest lie of competition is high achievers especially spend their lives trying to be better than everyone else. And the problem with that is you're alone, and the better you get, the more alone you are. If everybody has to be worse than you, you are alone up there with, in my case, it was like, I didn't want nobody above me. I wanted everyone below me. And guess what happened to my addiction during that time as well? And not even when I say that, it's not even my sexual acting out. It's my desire to get money, my desire to get attention. I mean, things got off the charts, just bad all around, incredibly disconnected. Because you know who else was down there? My wife.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, 99% of us are designed, I don't want to say designed or evolved, however you want to look at that, to connect with others. We're social animals, and you can't have intimate connection if you are not equal.
Mm-hmm.
So you are ultimately always alone, right? And you're making up for that deficit somehow, right? Like, so if you have to escape your own shame by putting yourself up above other people, you are destined to continue a lonely life, and you have to make that choice, right? Can you sit with yourself long enough to deal with that, to change your relationship to whatever that dynamic is, where you have to be better than to have a relationship, because you're not really having a relationship.
Yeah, if you got to be better than them, I mean, think about how sick
that's
that is,
not a
right?
relationship. A real intimate relationship is about equal people coming together and connecting on this same plane. You're not connecting with somebody if you're better than them.
Well, think about the relationship for the parents listening. I mean, arguably one of the most beautiful relationships, it should be you and your spouse, but typically kids, your kids are usually the only ones that get that level of grace, of oneness. Your kids, you don't flex on your kids and come home and show them your paycheck. I mean, it's just, you wouldn't do that to your kid, to put him in there. Hey, look how much money your dad makes. We just don't do it. We don't posture with our kids because we don't see the point. Why would I want to make me better than them? We just don't do it as parents. So then the question that I always have is, why would you do it to your spouse and partner? Because we do want to take the one up on them quite often. We might flash them the paycheck, but we posture on our partners. Addicts do all the time. I mean,
then you don't have to deal with yourself. Right? Look, if you're one up, you don't have to face yourself.
Right.
You don't have to face your shame. You don't have to face your stuff. It's easier in a way. It's lonely, but it's easier, right? You don't have to face it then. Like you can pretend that you're better than and walk around in that space if that's what you want to do. And then, but that's why they're listening to this podcast. That's why you're listening to this podcast, because you're not happy.
Right.
Well, I love that not working.
I love that you took it this way because, one of the more granular examples I try to show people, because most of the people listening to this are, high performers or entrepreneurs. So I use a lot of business examples, but you always hear about that person with the it factor. And it's always spoken about like, maybe they were born with it. But you know what I have realized, especially through recovery, when you walk into that networking group or whatever, and you see that guy who has the it factor, I mean, he walks in and it's almost like you feel him when he comes in, and everyone just looks at him. He has something that you want. It's just this it factor. And you know what I've realized through recovery is everyone assumes it's his money because he is successful. That's the thing about the people with the it factor. They are wildly successful. They get opportunities just fall. They have to say no to opportunities. But you know what I've realized through the recovery about the it factor? He's the only one there who's not there for money. He is there to see if there's someone who sees the unique value that he has to offer. And if it works out and it doesn't harm his life and it enhances the other person's life and there's a equalness, then he'll enter a real business relationship. But there's nothing more. This is a most granular example.
It's powerful. You can sense it. I know what you mean.
Like, if you meet a person,
it's a comfort with that.
Is the only reason they're there is to get referrals from you, you feel it the second you shake their hand. And that's what it's like to meet a sex addict. It's just, there's this thing in them that is just disconnected, and you're only ever giving someone a fraction of you. So that's for the high performers listening. I would say, if you think you're successful now, wait till when someone shakes your hand and you're no longer spliced in these different directions. And there's just this, evenness of I am no better or different than you. And it's because it's the same thing. When you shake someone's hand and they're not better than you, what you're giving to that other person is, hey, you aren't less either. We are the same, right? You and I are the same. And it's just this beautiful thing. And it cures, it's recovery, what I just said, I know it's a business example, but isn't that recovery?
Yeah, I think so, because that's they're comfortable in their body, in the sense that they have changed that relationship with themselves and they're comfortable there. So they're not running from shame. They don't have to splice anything out, because they can come as a whole person. But there's a journey to get there, and it's worth doing. But it's hard work. And when you can kind of feel the people that are comfortable in their skin, they've gone through the journey, you can kind of hear it in their voice. And it feels good. You feel you can almost instantly connect with them, right, on a deep level, and it's not necessarily superficial in any way. It is what it is, and from there the relationships flow, and it works if it works. But you're not running. You don't have to run anymore.
There's no agenda. There's no agenda, right?
Because that's no agenda. There's creating and making amazing things and doing amazing things. But there's no running. It's a different kind of drive, I guess.
Well, human beings, the way, just look at, Maslow is probably the most understood by a lot of people, because it's presented in elementary school or high school. Everyone's always looking at his little hierarchy of needs, right? But when you look at how humans are just designed at birth, there's just evidence dating back to even some of the earliest psychological work that these humans are designed to get their needs met from other humans. And so this, to your point, this, when you show up with an agenda, a man-made agenda, right? Because I think that's what we're talking about, is humans all want to be connected and make an impact. And so they're going to be interacting in the world. And if you're not paying attention to it, they might not look that different from everyone else, because they're still creating change. And I mean, you and I are making this, we're recording this right now to benefit others. And so it's like, they're still doing a lot of the same stuff that you see. The difference is, there's not a man-made agenda of, if I do A, B, C, D, and E, and F, then that should add up to blank. It's this inherent.
And I'll finally be lovable, value. Right? Exactly. I'll finally be lovable. Exactly. I'll finally, people can I can finally accept myself, and people will accept.
I'll be respected.
Accept me. I'll be respected. I'll be valued. And that goes back to that core root of shame, right? I'm not worthy of being part of the tribe. There's a piece of me that I'm not. I don't deserve to be here. That's that toxic shame, right? The shame with the self. There's something lacking in me that won't allow me to be part of this, and I feel it. So I have to hide it. I have to split it off. I either have to mask it so much that I pretend it doesn't even exist, and I move into entitlement, and I move into grandiosity. Or the other direction, where I move into self-loathing and shame, and then I'll cover it up by getting hits of either being successful or going to engaging in sexual activity that makes me feel
Mhm.
whole, or whatever it is.
Mhm.
But to me, a lot of this comes back to that shame affect,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
that's where it's really tied together. And when I work with individuals, that's where, at the end of the day, I think that's where we get to that deep shame, and we
Mhm.
start to heal that.
Well, nothing kills it like a powerful peer group. I mean, it
Yeah.
just kills, you can only be the worst and a bad person until you get in a group full of a bunch of people who basically feel the same way. I mean, they've got the pedal to the metal, full speed ahead in the attempt to, hopefully before they run out of time, to be enough. And the irony is, you walk into that room, especially in our, because there's a lot of impressive people in our group. When you walk in and it's like, whoa, 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 you feel that way about yourself?
Yeah.
You shouldn't, because, if I had what you had, I wouldn't feel. And then and then you meet the next guy. It's like, oh, he feels that way. And then and then that's that great equalizer of,
Yeah.
well, I can't be the worst person. It's almost like this, there's the race to the best. And then you come to a recovery group and it's like the race to the worst.
You don't get to be
there.
you don't get to be on top, right? You
Right.
don't get to hide in that framework of like, I'm better than, or look at all my successes. I can hide in that and get that esteem. Now you're with people that are kind of equal in there, and now you have to once again go back and face that piece of you. And if you can do it in a loving, and everybody can do it in a community together, in a caring, compassionate, loving community, I find that's where healing starts to really take place, when we can find that community that matches us, and can then help us heal through that process, where we can learn to accept ourselves. I have a saying that I believe we heal through the eyes of other people, right? We need other people to let us know in the beginning, let us know that we're okay, that it's okay to come out of hiding, so to speak. It's okay to put those fears out there. And if you can be in a group with supportive people that can hear you and understand you, you can start to heal that dynamic. And then you can heal it for yourself, and then you can heal it for your partner too.
And it's I think it's tough for high achievers, right? Because I think, you're so used to the resume being a good thing. And then I think you walk into a recovery group and it's like the game's actually committing to less. It's accepting less things as true. And it's like, you're so used to like, oh, look at all these truths that I have learned and acquired. And look at what they've done for me. And all of a sudden you walk into recovery and it's like, I mean, maybe you're the most successful guy in the room, but you're actually the furthest behind, because you've become so much that you're going to have to work. That though a lot of that stuff is inversely related to your recovery, because you can't lean on it, because it's not you. It's man-made, right? And it's like this, how do I lean on self when I've been shape-shifting for so long? I'm not sure what that is, right?
Yeah. And if you're with a good group and you're with a group for a while, it will shake out, right? You can't hide in a group forever. It will come out, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
But I think that's what also keeps people from engaging in these kind of communities, because, oh my gosh, if I stay here too long, they're going to find out the truth. Even though I have all this outside success, I'm really not.
Well,
right?
we had a new guy come, and he was like, he was talking to one of the other guys, and he was like, oh, how long have you been in the Successful Addict? And he was like, I'm going on my 3rd year. And this guy's like, oh my gosh, why? Like, I can't have that. My wife's not. And he said, no, I'm staying because I'm playing a different game now. It's an integrity, right? It's a commitment to reality. And he's like, honestly, without to your point there, a lot of people, and I say that, I'm repeating it again because it was so imperative, with a group for a long time, any of us can go. But I mean, to your point, Duane, after a while, the truth comes out. It's just, you can only, with a bunch of other addicts, you can only hide for so long. I would say the reason we used to do 3-day retreats, we changed them to 4, because usually after day 2, the truth is just leaking out, and you almost can't. And then day 3 is just like a truth. It's a truth bomb. On that note,
And
can
that's
you
great,
tell us?
though. That's where the healing's going to start. And I mean, I guess that goes back to the very beginning, just surrendering to that process, let go, and just kind of have faith and jump in and, see where it takes you. Don't try and fight it. You don't get lost in trying to protect yourself from yourself. Like, it's not going to work, and you're going to be lonely and miserable. And just jump in and find that community that works for you, and go for it, and surrender to the process. I mean, it's so, like you said, the guy who's been there for 3 years, he's on a different level at this point. It's not about, just trying to fix it and hide it. It's like, that doesn't matter anymore. There's nothing to hide. I just want to be the best person I can be. I just want to show up in this world as my best self. That's what's most important to me. And I love to see that transition and all the rest that follows from that, right? It's amazing. And successful people still remain successful, and they still keep doing great things, but they're in this new state of mind. And I guess it also goes back to what we were talking about earlier, that relationship to self. It's this new relationship, and it's amazing to see. I love it.
Well, they say, they say marriage is, and I know guys, they always they can't believe when what I'm about to say, but the marriages that come out of this are better than they ever were. And it's because your wife gets to be with someone she fell in love with 10% of you. For most high achievers, you've shape-shifted so much by the time she met you. She fell in love with 10% of you. And so that's why it's like, imagine how she'll feel when she gets that additional 90. That is why relationships become better than they ever were, because she's with 10 times the person she loved. And again, that's that surrender. And I want to clarify for everybody. I know surrender is kind of one of those garbage terms, because it's like, okay, great, Duane and Roland, how do I do that? You can't do surrender. It's one of those things where you have to listen to what Duane and I said today, and you just have to let it happen. You got to do the thing. You got to swipe the card, go to the event. I mean, you just need to do, just like in business and your career, you took chances on yourself then. This is no different now. Duane, how do they work with you? You're an impressive dude. I know a lot of people are going to want to. Where are you licensed? And what options do they have?
Absolutely. So they can find my podcast, theaddictedmind.com. They can go there and find that podcast as well. They can find me at where I work. I work in California. I'm a licensed therapist in California. They can go to novusmindfullife.com, and they can find me there and connect with me. And I have staff here that are all trained, and work in sex addiction and partner trauma and specialize in that. And we have a whole team works through this model, works through this stuff, and can take people through this process. If they want to understand more about how shame kind of runs this process in the background,
or halts recovery, honestly.
Halts recovery and stops it, and how getting through that, is a key part of getting to the other side. And I think, the example you gave of that person who was in your group, and they're doing this for integrity. They're doing this because they want to be a better person. You're going to have to walk through the shame to get there. But once you do, it just makes life so much easier and calmer. Oh my gosh, it's so much better.
Thanks, Duane, dude. I hope we do this again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Roland.